Hi, my name's Nick, and welcome to episode 6 of Need More Vocals, where I'm tackling the issues in the New Zealand music industry as part of one of my university papers. Today, we've got a special guest. I'll just let him do his own introduction. Turanga, take it away.
What's up, everybody? Turanga here, bass player and hired gun for Te Reo Maori heavy metal band Alien Weaponry.
How long you been in the music industry, bro? You always been a bass player?
No. So I've been in the band now for, this must be coming, I must have probably just hit my 5th year in August this year, I think. I was not always a bass player. I was a multi-instrumentalist, but I only picked up the bass when I got the text from Henry to be like, hey, do you want to audition for the bass role? I was like, I've never played a bass before. He's like, yeah, I know, but you play guitar. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. I'll give it a try. 5 years later. Yeah, and I literally walked down to the music store and bought the cheapest bass off the wall because we were in COVID at the time. So I did the audition like over camera. Like I filmed myself in my living room.
Yep.
And sent it up their way. And then when we came out of the lockdowns, I went up to Auckland and did the audition. And 5 years later, here I am.
Were you in bands before Alien Weaponry?
With Henry, like in high school, like fun ones, not really serious ones. I believe it or not, I used to hate performing. I was a very shy performer, especially playing the instruments that I like. Not that I don't like bass, but that I really put my time and effort into. I held myself to a much higher standard. So in piano and guitar, which were like my main instruments, because I was like, I considered myself a piano and a guitar player. I freaked out about performing it for people because I was like, I have to be really good. And so I used to just hate performing. And that was the nice thing about joining the band, was I just didn't hold myself to that standard on the bass. And I felt like I could actually just enjoy the performing part of the gig. So yeah. I was not it was a very weird pipeline of like, in high school bands, didn't play music for anybody but myself and my girlfriends or my roommates in my privacy of my own house. And then I was on stage in front of big festivals with Alien Weaponry. It was a very strange, like...
Yeah. There was no sort of steps.
There was no steps.
Leap. So today's interview series, or this interview series, is about tackling the problems in the music industry. I've spoken to sound engineers, through to hip-hop artists, people who do bookings, all that sort of stuff. So now, as a musician, what do you think is the biggest social problem in the New Zealand music industry is? So that could be inequalities, discriminations, anything like that is sort of like an example of a social problem.
Yeah, there's definitely still a sort of we're an interesting example as well, of course, because I should say the band is, because they were doing this before I was a part of it, was obviously singing in Te Reo Maori. And for the band, pretty much from the get-go, at least the get-go of their public rise, that they have seen it all in terms of the discrimination stuff. Producers who would be like, you should just sing it in English, it'll be way more popular, like our biggest song, Tai Tangata, originally, that was apparently told to be sung in English. This was within the country as well, so this was working in the New Zealand scene before we had started working with international producers and that, who, which is kind of crazy to say sometimes. It's like the international people we worked with like valued the Maori part a lot more than a lot of the people that we had seen, here, or the boys had seen here. And it's getting better, of course, because the general approach to like Maori music has grown hugely over the past few years. But I remember watching the boys when they first came out, and they used to talk about like just very difficult to get on the radio because it was like, no one wants to listen to those songs, and blah blah blah. The genre plays a part in that too. It's like it's a tricky kind of losing on both ends.
Especially with metal, and especially in New Zealand. Yes.
Yeah, you're playing a genre that nobody wants to listen to in a language that you've been told nobody wants to listen to, whether that's true or not. But and it's still going, and we're still seeing the the news is still showing all the abuse and stuff like that that is going on. Not that I have experienced anything like that, of course, but as we're seeing, and it's been big news recently, of course, people who play big roles in the behind the scenes stuff, and on stage, to be fair, you know, still getting caught doing bad things to people, abusing their power and stuff like that. But I would say I think one of the biggest issues is actually the I don't know what you would call it, like the old head mentality. That is, like, I always think, like, when we look at festival billings and things like this that happen within the country, it's the same artists over and over and over and over again. And it's like, some of them don't even really make new music, so they're just playing their old songs over and over, which is fine. You know, it's cool to have the classics up in there. But when you are a small country that only runs small-ish festivals, and so 80-90% of your bill is musicians that we've been listening to for the past 10, 20, 30 years, this country has so much incredible talent that is still coming out and being discovered, that the industry likes to just kind of be like, too bad, we're going to put so-and-so that we already know is thing up on the thing. And they're not very adventurous, you know, with branching out and giving a platform to some of the, not necessarily younger, but just up and coming, newly discovered talent that's out there, because it's immense, man. Like, this country, this year alone, I said some of the best music I've heard this year is out of New Zealand musicians. Yet I've never seen them live. I've never seen an opportunity for them to be live. You know, it's like, I've just seen them because I've seen them on social media. And it's like, but social media only can get us so far. You know, we definitely, well, the band definitely hasn't gotten its rise through social media. It was through getting shows. But even the band discovered that, because that's why we spend half our time overseas, you know, because it's like the overseas will have us on stage, but then it's expensive, of course, because you've got to get out overseas. So it's this real tricky thing. So, and because I'm sure everybody else has already mentioned the abuse and discrimination and things like that. So one thing that I definitely see is the way that this country, like, has a very traditional old look after the ones who have already been there. This is a very
common theme, especially with it's across the generations too. Like, I've, you know, interviewed people sort of in the older age groups and the younger age groups and all that sort of stuff, and it's a common theme for local bands, basically. I just remember one of the interviews was, go see local bands because they're some of the best bands, but no one's coming to see them, and everyone wants to go to everyone that they already know. So go out, take a chance on a local band, because you might end up they might not be the local band forever.
Yeah, totally. And I do think half of the issue is on the audience. You know, that thing, you go, and you know, there's so many factors that play into that. The economic status of the situation of the country. So it's like, if you've only got, you know, your $50 to spend, do I take a gamble on the random band that I've never heard of, or do I go watch the person that I know is going to give me a great show? You know, and so it's like, if people just had money to toss around and time to toss around, it's much easier to do that. You know, so I get it. But yeah, it's a very tricky thing. Also, the way that this country relies a lot on or expects a lot of bands to come to them. You know, we for a small country, we sure as hell don't like to travel around it. You know, and a great example is, I want to point the finger at Hamiltonians, right? Now with the highways and stuff, Auckland is not that far away, and a lot more acts could do a lot more shows if, you know, you can book a show in Auckland. But even for us, for example, we could sell the biggest headline show that we could if we just did Auckland, and then the surrounding areas came to Auckland. You know, like when we go to the States, people drive 19 hours to come watch you in a 50 capacity bar in the back of some random city in a state. You know what I mean? Just because their culture surrounding the travel is different. They're big and they expect to drive. We're small, so we kind of have the opposite, but I still think it's like, well, it doesn't quite balance out. And so then what happens is you have bands that if they couldn't do 50 here and they can't do 50 there, but they could do 50 of 25 and 25 from out of town came, and you'd have one sold out show. It's like, so that sort of on the audience side is also a factor.
Yep. So moving on, biggest political problem in the New Zealand music industry.
What is that? What comes under that category?
Well, currently we're under this 2025, so we're currently under a right-wing government. Traditionally, right-wing governments don't usually fund arts, usually cut funding, all those sorts of things. Do you think that any of that sort of stuff has anything to play, especially with you guys at your level, or anyone at any level, I suppose? But yeah, just, is there a political problem in the New Zealand music industry from the government side of things, from government funding, or anything like that?
This is probably where I'm a little more out of touch, because I don't deal with the funding side of the band, because that's out of my jurisdiction, so to speak. Just as the hired guy, but I know, like, for all our music videos and that, and our touring, we normally acquire funding from NZ On Air and all these things that we have still managed to get, as far as I'm concerned, on this recent album cycle, which has only been over the past year. So since the current government has been in play, so I don't know if they have any control over any of that stuff, but our usual funding that we normally get has continued to be a part of our processes. So I'm not entirely sure there on that one. I would definitely think just the general air that the current political situation, for example, this is probably a good example, is we have this very interesting thing happening right now where people are all of a sudden, as in recently, within this recent album cycle, changed them, like we're now considered political as a band. And I'm like, right? And I'm like, this is interesting. So we've had a lot of comments going, oh, I used to like your music before you went political, or before you went woke, or whatever those words are. And I think this is interesting because it's like, well, actually, if you listen to any of the music before I was a part of it, when the band first started, the subject matter is exactly the same. But the political climate has changed. So the interpretation of that music, or the response, has changed. And so I think that's probably a very interesting thing that we see with the ebb and flow of politics, is the ebb and flow of people's interpretation of arts, because of what is being affected to them, how they're absorbing the things that are happening in our social climate.
That you guys are deemed as a political band.
Yeah, well, what I find fascinating is, like, and now, like, because it's the same.
It's the same before.
It's literally the same. And so it's like, once because it wasn't, things Maori, for example, weren't as confronting. When did the first album come out? 8 years ago. Because things Maori weren't as confronting back then, it was just cool music. And now that things Maori are in the forefront because of the political situation, now everyone's like, oh, which is really weird. And it means nothing if it's someone who's never heard of us before, and then their first introduction to us has been now. Like, okay. But what we thought was really interesting was people who were changing. They once liked us, and now they think they don't, because now they think we've changed, which is to do with the political climate right now. And so I think it just means a lot more people need to actually
maybe just have a look at your lyrics.
Literally just dive any deeper than, I don't know what. That's the first thing I think, is like, because I can't even quite fathom it. I'm like, what were you listening to, or what do you think you were listening to for the past 8 years before you suddenly changed your mind now? Like, I just don't understand what kind of very shallow understanding of our music is. Peculiar.
And I know that you said before about that you don't do a lot of the funding stuff and things like that. But from your level, what do you think the biggest economic problem is in the New Zealand music industry?
Well, that would be, I would actually say it's less for us as local musos. It's, relatively easy for us to play somewhere. You can play in a small pub that lets you play, and plugs up, or you can be LAB 660 who can still play, Eden Park or big arenas around the country. I would say our biggest issue and it is something that I have seen in the news lately, actually, that the current government is trying to fix, however that works, is for our international acts playing here. Is a severe, and we see this, because we spend most of our time outside of the country performing with all these amazing bands, and on our comment sections on social media are always people go, oh, bring so and so back to New Zealand. We did a tour with Gojira. Everyone said, oh my god, does that mean Gojira is going to come to New Zealand, or blah 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 blah. And I've had so many conversations. Funny, I was just talking about this the other day. So many conversations with these bands when they go, oh my god, you're from New Zealand, wow. Bands that are in a much more financially stable circumstance than we are, go, oh my god, New Zealand, I would love to play New Zealand one day, but it's so expensive. It's so hard to get there. The venues are difficult to claim. Let's take the biggest in the world right now, Taylor Swift, right? Why the heck is Taylor Swift not play here? Oh, because Eden Park's silly rules on
noise and
noise and limits.
Yeah.
The amount of money for economically that someone like Taylor Swift brings to the regions that she plays is huge. And no, but because some blokes who live next to the stadium are like but in general, like, also because I find, like, for us to fly out of New Zealand and come back, and with the starting and ending point being New Zealand, is like a cheaper flight than if it was the flip as well. So
true, right?
Like, so if I wanted to fly New Zealand, LA, New Zealand, it's cheaper than going LA, New Zealand, LA.
Buzzy.
It's the same flight.
Yeah.
But because my ex-girlfriend was American, so when I used to fly to her, it cost X amount. And when she used to fly to me, it was like for the same flight, same time of year. And we were like, what the heck, dude? So then that's also a factor as well, right? Is like, and obviously that's tourism money and things like that. So the airlines thing, that whatever. But that's a factor, and we already know how expensive it is to tour because we're flying out of New Zealand. So it's even more expensive for those bigger acts to fly in. So even though they got more money, it still costs more. And then there's their big production, that's like, I always think when Motley Crue did their final thing, of course, they didn't have half their production. That's why they could come. They didn't come without his big fancy flippy kit or whatever the hell he does, they just come bare bones. But not all acts want to strip down their production. They would just rather do no show. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot. So that's easily the biggest problem right now in this country, is like the lack of getting international acts to come, and being able to accommodate that financially and all those things. And it's hard. We're in an island in the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. I get it. I totally get it. I mean, like, sometimes in the big countries, some states don't even see shows ever. You know what I mean? It's like, so I get it. But some people make it work, so it's possible. We get big acts.
We had Ailstorm, so we played a show with Ailstorm recently, the pirate metal band.
Yeah.
And they usually have this massive rubber duck on stage. They weren't going to bring that to New Zealand.
No, exactly. And sometimes it's a tricky thing. It's like sometimes it's on the artist to just make that decision, because obviously people do it. We played the shows with Guns N' Roses here. If Guns N' Roses can do it, I'm sure Taylor Swift can do it, But on the other end, I know sometimes fans expect a certain thing, and they don't always understand why they didn't get it here.
Yeah.
It's like it's just not doable.
That's because we're in the corner of the blood.
Literally, I'm like, and New Zealand, because then the other thing is, of course, is our country doesn't have the supply to then supply it. Like, because that's the next thing, right? It's like, okay, well, if you don't need to ship it in, we'll just hire it locally.
Yep.
But New Zealand doesn't have that either. So, that's a tricky thing for us.
Yeah. All right. And then the last question. Turanga is made king of the world tomorrow. So you can make a royal decree in the New Zealand music industry, and you can change anything. What would you change? One thing.
Ooh.
And no one's allowed to argue. Everyone's
allowed to argue. I could change absolutely anything.
Yeah. And the New Zealand music industry. It's not the music industry as a whole, like international.
Yeah. No, New Zealand, it would definitely be like, I don't know if it's to do with the industry, but it's the noise thing. Like, being able to make it so that nobody was able to complain if you live near a venue. Like, that alone, like, I think it's just, you're nuts. I always think this about the venues that are like in central Auckland. I'm like, if you decided to live in the middle of a city that's on you, dude.
Yeah.
You know, and because that is such a pain. You know, you have to be so then careful that you don't, you know, because it's also dangerous for the venue owners. You know, it's not just on you as the performer. It's a whole bunch of things, but like it ruins so many opportunities, and for fun, people just let people have fun, you know, because I think ultimately music is about having a good time.
Yep.
Removing any of those barriers that stop people from having a good time that's a thumbs up for me. But the noise one is number one. There's those grumpy people that decided to live next to a venue. I'm like, that is on you, bro.
Especially if the venue was before they got there.
That's right. You know, I get it. Maybe if someone just plopped it in there and it hadn't been a venue for all these years, but I'm like, places that have been venues for years and you've moved in yesterday and you're like, wait a second. I'm like, no, dude, no.
Western Springs, the stock car track, and all that stuff comes to mind, and
all
Eden
those
Park and all those sorts of things. Even down to, like, you know, we've had some venues here in Welly that closed down eventually just because they got too many. I think there was another one in Auckland just now, Pararoa Brewing, I think it's called.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, for the same reasons, because of the noise. I'm like, what are you talking about? You live next to a pub, you know? And when I used to live in Wellington, I lived above Valhalla. And so I was like, I know what I was in for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So on the weekend, if I wasn't out, I could look out over my balcony and watch everyone getting ruckus ass down in Valhalla. I'm like, you live in a city above a venue. It's what you get.
And you know the noise will shut up eventually.
Yeah, that's right. I'm like, what does it matter if it's just a little bit later? It's a Saturday, bro.
Yeah. Have some fun. Have some fun. I'd like to conclude it there. Thank you very much for joining me today, Turanga. I'm a big fan of your music.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for coming in, helping out. And thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me. Yeah, sorry I was a bit late on the emails. It's been hectic here over the past few weeks. My brother's been moving houses.
All good. Cheers, brother. Thank you for that.
Thank you. All good.
And